All right, so today we're going to do a deep dive into Gillie Da Kid from this really interesting interview he did on Shannon Sharp's club, Shay.
Oh, yeah, I saw that one.
Yeah, and it's a great one. It's a
Yeah.
wild ride. I mean, you
Wow.
get Philly pride, you get raw honesty about the music industry,
Right.
and some pretty unexpected life lessons, actually.
Yeah, I mean, he really doesn't hold back, does he?
No, not at all. And I think that's part of what makes him so compelling. Right off the bat, though, that love for Philly just shines through.
Oh, absolutely.
He talks about the Eagles being like an escape for the city, especially with all the problems it faces. You know, a win can really lift everyone's spirits.
It's true. It's like sports can become such a core part of a city's identity,
Yeah.
especially in a place that's facing a lot of challenges. A team like the Eagles can bring people together. It's a sense of unity, a sense of hope.
And it's not even just the games themselves. I mean, Gilly's got this whole superstitious routine for game days.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about it.
He brings his own broom, like an actual broom, to every game.
I love that.
Can you imagine?
I mean, it might seem like a joke, but rituals like that can actually be really powerful, right? They give you a sense of control, even if it's just an illusion. It's like athletes with their pre-game routines or fans wearing their lucky jersey.
Yeah, it's all about that mental edge.
Exactly.
But things get really interesting when he starts opening up about his own life. He's incredibly open about the adversity he's faced, getting kicked out of college for armed robbery, losing his best friend, even getting shot.
Yeah, his story is really one of resilience, isn't it? He's experienced some incredibly tough times, but he's found a way to turn his life around. It's a good reminder that second chances are possible and that you can overcome some pretty huge obstacles.
Music was his lifeline. I mean, he talks about how it became this outlet, a way to process everything that had happened and build a new path for himself.
But he's also brutally honest about the music industry itself. He calls it fake, full of people trying to use each other. He even turned down a deal with Jay-Z because he didn't trust the contract.
Turning down Jay-Z, wow, that's a huge statement.
It really is. It shows that he understands the importance of protecting his own interests and staying true to his values. In an industry where so many young artists are eager to sign any deal that comes their way, it's a real lesson in knowing your worth.
Yeah, and it seems like that hustle has more than paid off. He's got this saying, if you want to be different, you got to hustle different. He even talks about waking up at 8 a.m. after a night at the club to get back in the studio.
I mean, that work ethic comes up again and again in the interview. It's like he's saying talent's not enough. You need that dedication, that consistent effort to reach your goals.
And speaking of hustle, his transition from rapper to podcast host with $1 million worth of game has been incredibly successful. Did you know it was the #2 podcast in the world at one point?
Yeah, it's really remarkable. He's adapted so well to the changing media landscape. It's more than that, though. He connects with a really specific audience that a lot of traditional media just overlooks.
Right.
He's leveraging his authenticity, his street cred, to build this really loyal following.
And it's funny, though, because he admits he didn't even understand podcasts at first. He thought they were dry.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
You gotta love the irony. Even someone as successful as Gillie Da Kid can have these preconceived notions. And it's okay to evolve, to change your thinking.
It's true. With all this success, though, he also talks about the challenges of staying grounded, the pressure to keep achieving and not get caught up in the hype.
It's an important point, isn't it? The other side of fame and fortune. It's like he's reminding us that success comes with its own set of problems and that it's so important to maintain that balance. Keep your perspective.
He talks about his support system, people who keep him grounded, family, real friends. Those are the connections that really matter.
It's about remembering where you came from, staying true to yourself even when there are all these distractions around you.
Yeah, and despite all the tough talk, he is clearly committed to giving back. He talks about providing millions in grants to Black-owned businesses in Philly.
There's a deep sense of social responsibility there. It's like he's saying success isn't just about personal gain. It's about using what you have to make a positive impact on your community.
And this is where things get really interesting because he doesn't shy away from tough topics like gun violence in Philadelphia, especially having been personally affected by this tragedy.
Yeah, it's a heartbreaking part of the interview, losing his son to gun violence, but it reveals a different side of him. He speaks so candidly about the pain and the complex issues surrounding it. He even draws some comparisons to New York's stricter gun laws and advocates for stricter regulations.
He paints such a vivid picture of how this culture of gun violence has almost become normalized in some areas. He even shares a chilling anecdote about being shot himself.
It really underscores the very real dangers and the devastating consequences of gun violence. His personal experience gives his perspective so much weight.
It makes you think about the systemic problems and the urgent need for solutions. It's a conversation we can't afford to ignore.
Absolutely. And his honesty, his vulnerability in that moment is what makes it so impactful. He doesn't hold back, and it makes his message hit home even harder.
He also talks about the importance of mentors and positive role models, especially for young people growing up in difficult environments. That guidance and support to help break free from cycles of violence.
Right. It's about showing them that there are other paths to success and fulfillment. And he's a powerful example of that overcoming adversity and making a positive impact.
And he's doing that not just through his music and podcasts, but through his philanthropy and community engagement.
Exactly. He's a complex and compelling figure who has faced these incredible challenges and achieved remarkable success. But what's even more striking is how he's using his platform to uplift others and make a real difference.
It's a reminder that even when faced with adversity, there's always hope, always that potential for change and redemption.
And that's what makes this deep dive so fascinating. His story challenges us to confront uncomfortable truths, to reflect on our own values, and think about how we can positively impact our own communities.
He doesn't just scratch the surface. He digs deep. And that's what makes this conversation so compelling.
So now let's shift gears a bit. We know he turned down Jay-Z, but what happened next? How did he navigate the music industry after that and ultimately achieve the success he has today?
That's a great question. And it's a story that reveals even more about his resilience and business acumen. So let's dig into that next. So we were talking about Gillie turning down that deal with Rockefeller, right? He felt like it wasn't the right move for him at the time. But what happened after he walked away from Jay-Z?
Well, this is where you really see his independent spirit shine through. He talks about how he was basically blackballed in the industry for refusing to sign.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Certain gatekeepers made it super hard for him to get his music played or even land collaborations.
Wow, so there were real consequences for going against the grain.
Absolutely. He even mentions dealing with rumors that he was difficult to work with, which obviously hurt his reputation. It shows you how much power those major labels have, even beyond the contracts themselves.
It's crazy. But Gillie's not one to back down from a challenge. He ended up signing with Swishahouse Records, right?
He did, and he credits Tony Draper, the CEO, with giving him a glimpse of what real success in the industry could look like.
I remember him describing Draper's house, like this extravagant mansion with a crazy car collection.
And remember, Gillie came from humble beginnings, so seeing that level of wealth firsthand must have been really motivating. It showed him that his dreams were attainable.
Yeah, and that's when things really started taking off.
Yeah.
He talks about getting into bidding wars with major labels, ultimately signing with Cash Money Records, and getting a $200,000 advance.
It sounds like a dream come true, right? But like a lot of things in the music industry, there's a twist. Despite signing with Cash Money, Gillie never actually released a song with them.
Wait, what happened? Why not?
This is where his business savvy comes in. Cash Money wanted his publishing rights. So basically ownership and control over his music and any future royalties.
Oh, wow, so they wanted to own his creative output.
Exactly. And Gillie was smart enough to understand the long-term value of those rights. He refused to give them up, even if it meant delaying his success with Cash Money.
So he walked away from another huge deal to protect his ownership.
He did, and it shows real foresight. It's so important for artists, especially young artists, to understand their rights and all the ins and outs of the industry.
Definitely. So what did he do during that time? I mean, he was signed, but couldn't release any music.
He talks about immersing himself in the Cash Money culture, spending hours in the studio watching guys like Lil Wayne and Baby and really absorbing that work ethic, the energy of that environment.
He even talks about going back to the studio at 8 a.m. after a night out.
Yeah.
I mean, this guy is nonstop.
He was still hungry for success. It's like he treated that period as an apprenticeship, learning the ropes and honing his craft even without releasing music.
So even though he wasn't putting out tracks, he was still building his skills and his reputation.
Exactly. And this experience was actually crucial to the creation of $1 million worth of game. He was already known for giving advice, for sharing his game. He even had an album with that title back in 2015.
He mentions a video from 2009 where he's in the studio with Meek Mill and Black Thought, and he says, "I give you me and Wallo's game for free. Y'all just don't be listening." It sounds like the idea for the podcast had been brewing for a while.
It was definitely in the works. And when Wallo got out of prison, they started talking seriously about creating a platform where they could share their experiences and insights with a wider audience.
It's funny, though, because Gillie admits he wasn't initially into the idea of a podcast. He thought they were dry.
Right. Full circle moment. It's amazing. Now he's one of the most successful podcasters out there.
And they've built a huge following by being authentic. Speaking directly to their audience and offering these unfiltered perspectives on everything from street life and music to success and failure.
$1 million worth of game. It's become a cultural phenomenon. It's raw, it's entertaining, and it gives you this really unique look into a world that a lot of people only see from the outside.
What are some of the most memorable moments from the podcast? Gilly mentions a few in the interview.
Oh, he talks about getting into a fight with Wallo early on. They even had to tint the windows of their studio to keep the neighbors from seeing.
No way. That's hilarious.
Yeah,
It sounds like they have a great dynamic that really translates well to the podcast.
they definitely do. He also talks about some incredible interviews with guys like Lil Durk, Kodak, Black Young Thug. He even talks about going to the projects with Kodak at like 2 in the morning.
Now that's a story I'd love to hear.
hmm
But he also talks about having these really meaningful conversations with guests like The Baby and Tory Lanez.
That's what makes their podcast so compelling. They're not afraid to tackle serious topics or give people a platform to share their stories, even when those stories are controversial. They believe in second chances and understand that people make mistakes.
They talk about creating a space where people can be vulnerable, share their experiences, and hopefully learn from each other.
Right, it's about fostering a sense of community and understanding, which is something that's often missing in the world of social media.
And it's clear that approach is resonating with people. $1 million worth of game has become more than just a podcast. It's a movement.
It really is. It's a testament to the power of authenticity, vulnerability, and real-life experiences. And a reminder that even when things get tough, there's always a way to bounce back, reinvent yourself, and achieve success on your own terms. But Gilly's story isn't just about success and reinvention, it's also about loss grief and the complexities of fatherhood.
Yeah, you're right. He talks about the loss of his son and the importance of forgiveness, especially forgiving himself. That's a powerful and deeply personal aspect of his journey that we should explore further. We've been going through Gillie Da Kid's story, his Philly roots, his music career, and of course, $1 million with a game. But there's this whole other layer that we need to talk about, his experience with fatherhood and loss.
Yeah, it's such a personal and emotional part of his life. He opens up about the death of his son, and you can just hear the rawness in his voice.
Mhm.
Talking about the pain, the guilt, and trying to make sense of it all.
It's like this reminder that even with all the success and fame, life can still hit you with these incredibly hard moments.
Hmm.
And there are no easy answers for that kind of pain.
It's true, and he talks about how he's navigating grief, especially while being in the public eye, trying to be strong for his family, but also acknowledging that he's still processing everything. It's a powerful kind of vulnerability.
Yeah, he doesn't shy away from those tough emotions.
Mm.
He talks about the guilt he carries, wondering if he could have done things differently to protect his son.
That's so common for parents who have experienced this kind of loss. That feeling of what if can be overwhelming, but him being honest about it is important. It helps normalize the grieving process and encourages others to really face their emotions.
And it seems like he's trying to channel that pain into something positive. He talks about using his platform to speak out against gun violence and to mentor young people who might be at risk.
It's a powerful way to honor his son's memory, I think. Turning his personal tragedy into action and working to prevent other families from experiencing the same thing.
It really speaks to his resilience, his desire to make a difference.
Yeah.
It would be understandable if he just retreated after something like that. But instead, he's using his experience to try and create change.
And that's part of what makes Gilly's story resonate so much. He's faced so much adversity, but he hasn't let it break him. He uses his experiences, both the good and the bad, to uplift others, to make a difference, and to leave the world better than he found it.
It's this reminder that even in the darkest times, there's always hope. That potential for growth and transformation. You know, finding meaning and purpose, even in the midst of pain.
I think that's a great way to put it. Gillie Da Kid is more than just a rapper or a media personality or a podcast host. He's a survivor, a fighter, and he embodies the human spirit's ability to overcome and find strength in being vulnerable.
His journey has had it all, highs and lows, successes and setbacks. But through it all, he stayed authentic, unapologetically himself, and committed to using his platform for good.
Absolutely. And he challenges us to do the same, right? To confront uncomfortable truths, to embrace our own vulnerabilities, and to find ways to make a positive impact on the world around us. It's a message that really sticks with you.
It really does. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of Gillie Da Kid, I want you to think about what resonated most with you. What challenged your assumptions? How can his story inspire you to face your own challenges and pursue your goals with that same passion and determination?
It's been a fascinating journey.
It really has. We hope this deep dive has left you with a renewed sense of hope, a deeper understanding of the complexities of life, and a commitment to making the most of every single moment. Thanks for joining us.